Hi, I'm Scott for ediblemusic.com. EQ is the second most powerful tool that you have available to you while you're mixing. And like any other effects processing or plugins that you might add, when you apply an EQ, it should be in response to what the recorded signal is asking you for. Usually EQ will first serve as a kind of a problem-solving measure. So let's talk about a few ways to use EQ. I'll show you some different situations that you might want to be using it, and you can integrate them into your own mixing workflow. They'll slot in there pretty nicely as you take the steps towards finishing up a mix. EQ is usually one of the earlier steps that you'd want to take. So let's start out by talking about the first way that you'd want to use it, which is to clean up. When you record a signal, if it's indoors somewhere or especially if it's outdoors, it's really difficult to not capture some room sounds that might be happening in addition to the instrument or the vocal that you might be trying to record. So on the lower end of the frequency spectrum, there might be some kind of rumbly frequencies rolling around that aren't actually part of the instrument that you're trying to record. So use your ears and kind of scan from the low frequencies all the way up to the top. If there are things like room noises, maybe the hum of an air conditioner or a train far out in the distance, that those low frequencies have seeped in to the recorded signal, then consider using a low pass to get rid of those and clear out the signal so that we're only hearing the instrument or the vocal as it was intended. A few other examples might be things like handling noises from the musician or hardware noises from the instrument, mechanical noises that might happen. Sometimes it's cool to keep those in there, the mechanical noises. Like I always like to listen to the hammer on a piano key or people's fingers hitting the piano key. I always find that really fun and cool and sounds great. But if there is someone playing a guitar and maybe their palm is kind of bumping up against the pickups or the strings a little bit too much, then again you'll get a kind of an unhelpful rumbly noise at the bottom that you can pull down a little bit in order to clarify the recorded signal. So this first way to use EQ is to clear out things that are not actually part of the sound but have nevertheless been captured by the microphone. It's kind of getting rid of all the clutter and the dirt and the gross stuff so that we have a nice pristine recorded signal. It's really hard to get a perfect signal when you're recording, and so EQ is a crucial tool to help tidy things up. As long as you record things and they sound pretty good, then you'll be on a good track and your EQ moves won't have to be too much. The second way that you'll want to think about this is as you're bringing tracks into the mix. So let's say, for example, you have started your mix and you've got your rhythm section, maybe your bass and your vocals. They're all sitting okay. And then when you bring in the next instrument, all of a sudden things might start to sound muddy. Well, that's a good clue that you'll want to use EQ as well. So in the second way to use it, we're thinking more about the broader scope of the mix. The first way to use it is to clean up an individual signal. The second way to use it is to listen and monitor as you're bringing in new elements into the mix. If things start to sound as though they're getting sort of covered up, or if you're recording an acoustic guitar and the resonance from the body of the guitar is just really big and boomy, then using an EQ filter to kind of press that down a little bit will in turn help to lift up the rest of the recorded signal. So often ducking things down is a really great way to clean up a program signal, and that's another use for EQ. These problems can sometimes be difficult to find, so what I would usually suggest to do is to start out with a wideband EQ and just move it around the frequency spectrum until the problem sound that is the reason why you decided to open up the EQ in the first place, until that problem frequency seems to disappear. That will help you then narrow it down. You can keep on kind of moving around and looking for it, but start nice and open and wide It's okay if you can't hear it right away, but you will hear that it will disappear, and that's a really good indicator that you're heading in the right direction. So then from there, you can narrow it down a little bit more until you find the right spot on the frequency spectrum to duck things down. And then in that same process, once you feel as though you've found the right frequency, play around with the cue a little bit more so that it's not taking out good parts that might be surrounding it. And as you're doing this is a really important part of mixing. I really recommend to turn it in and out, bypass the EQ, turn it on and off, so that you can know whether or not the EQ move that you've made is actually fixing the problem that inspired you to load up the EQ in the first place. So monitor that, make sure that you're cutting out the right spot that you need to be cutting out and keeping the nicer part of the signal intact. You can also do this for reverbs or room mics. Often, because reverbs model rooms, there can be a lot of that low-end rumble that gets produced that just starts rolling around in the mix and making everything sound really muddy and unclear. So on your reverb channels, I always suggest to do a high-pass filter on those as well. It will just help to shape the reverb so that it's located in the frequency spectrum where you want it to be. So in the first step, we cleaned up individual instruments, and in the second way of using EQ, we're thinking about it more in terms of the broader mix. When we start bringing things in together, if elements start to overlap, then EQ is going to be a really good choice to help to fix that problem. Those two ways to use EQ, clearing things out that are around the sound that you want, and tamping things down that are part of the sound but are producing problems with the wider mix, are going to be so helpful to getting your mixes in a good spot. And the third way to use EQ is to boost and emphasize the good parts of the sound that you have revealed by clearing away all of the bad parts. You can boost the EQ into areas where you want a program element to be a little bit more present. But the boosts that you'll want to perform will be, again, usually pretty broad in general, because unlike percussion instruments, a singer or an instrument player, a melodic instrument player, is going to be moving around the frequency spectrum quite a lot. So if you have just one little tight boost, all the frequencies are going to be moving around it. It's not really going to work that well. So this is the order of operations that you want to take. Next time you're opening up an EQ plugin, remind yourself, why am I doing this? And it should be one of these three reasons. 1, do you need to clean up an individual program element? 2, have you brought that program element into the mix and it's causing some problems that you'll need to make some adjustments on? And the third is for emphasis, to increase body or width or presence so that the part of the program element that you're working with is occupying the parts of the frequency spectrum that you want it to, and will help you to get a nice balance between everything. If you're really deliberate about it, then it's not as though it's a decision that you need to reflect on for a long time, but it's good to use this as a reminder to think about, well, what is the sound telling me that I need it to do? Does it want me to clear anything away, or does it want me to boost things? When you're deliberate about it, your decision making will become that much faster. So that's 3 ways to use EQ. I hope you have fun. I'll see you in the next one.